What's going on, people? How you doing? TK coming at you. Mr. Finance here on social media. Hashtag Master Wealth Builders. Today I just want to talk to you about finance. I started this conversation and for whatever reason the phone started glitching and everything started messing up. So I'm going to make another attempt at the conversation, and the concept is simple. Most people are out to lunch. They're completely in a fantasy world and they want you to coddle their fantasy. But just because you choose to live in a fantasy world doesn't mean that that's the way that things operate within the physical world that we all occupy. So in other words, your belief system or your personal opinions doesn't reflect nor affect the actual way things operate. And it's kind of comical to the degree people are in their fantasies and beliefs. You know, nature doesn't operate on belief systems. Even though that's what's sold to the public and that's what makes you feel good, nature itself operates on maximums, sound principles that are true in fact. So you don't get an excuse because you feel good with your beliefs. That's just not how things operate. So the concept of a corporation that created a democracy, and within the democracy, the corporation is owned or has a bunch of subsidiaries owned by the Roman Cure system. So finance within the corporate estate is cheating, involves carrying assets from your estate to their estate. And the fallacy or the pseudo money that people are programmed to think has value simply represents the actual land resources, gold and silver, that's being stolen from your estate that you don't even know that you have. So what people label as money really is a unsigned check from the corporation in which they have an unlimited printing supply and the faith and confidence backing that piece of paper to be exchanged in commerce is what gives it power. So essentially you have a Walmart currency that's being exchanged in commerce with other corporations, and your ability to exchange it with another corporation is the only thing that gives it power. So what you think is money is a debt instrument and representation of the equity belonging to the corporation that took over the Republic. So Walmart took over the Republic. The Republic ceased to exist in 1871. And you have a corporation that pretends to be government that issues private commercial paper. And everyone thinks that private commercial paper is money because they can exchange it in commerce. But just because you're in a fantasy doesn't make that fantasy real in terms of the actual operations within the occupied territory. So what we have is a bunch of people that live on Fantasy Island. and they choose to call themselves a corporation so that they can interact with other corporations. But the problem is that the land that does exist and that is being stolen, the resources, the gold and the silver that does exist and is being stolen, isn't represented in that paper. In other words, that paper, that private commercial debt instrument, is a representation of equity through the labor of the people and the physical land and resources being stolen. So that's the misconcept of money. The misconcept is that the unsigned blank check is the money, when it isn't. It's a representation of equity and value from physical resources being stolen. And you can't get people to understand that Walmart took over the Republic and essentially created other subsidiaries of Walmart that have the same name as you. So that's how Walmart is able to interact with you, subjugate you, because you call yourself that corporation that's on paper that sounds like your name. So the entire money game is controlled by limited access and engineered scarcity because Walmart has the monopoly on printing their currency. The corporation that's in charge of the Republic administers cheating between your estate and their estate as a belligerent trustee or FOFR. So you have got the money game really twisted and fucked up. You're living in a fantasy world that has nothing to do with the operations and the unum sanctum policy within the Republic. But one thing you fail to understand because of the lies, rights are established by the Constitution and treaty within the Republic. So if you are outside of the Constitution and the treaty, then you're outside of what your forefathers, your direct lineage, bloodline, relation created. Therefore, you have no rights as a Walmart subsidiary that you call yourself. You see, the labels, the brands, the caste system, the subjugation, the serfism that's created when you call yourself a corporation that sounds like your name, you have no rights as a human being because you are pretending to be that corporation. So everything within the democracy is a trap to basically subjugate you and control your access to resources. Mortgage, a dead pledge that's pre-foreclosed from the time you enter the adhesion contract. So as a sharecropper or a tenant, you never own anything. Your payments are denotes or dedontes, gifts, because you can't pay something with a debt instrument. So how can you pay off a debt with a debt? The contract is an adhesion contract that means one way, because the moment you enter it, you are a tenant. And the property is registered to the board of directors, Congress, and the lead bishop within that area of the Roman Catholic cura system. Because all corporations are subsidiaries of the main corporation, the Roman Catholic Church. So you really have it fucked up, and you don't understand that corporations or subsidiary corporations are not allowed to own anything. So as a subject, a serf to the 14th Amendment corpse, you're not allowed to own property. You're not allowed to interfere with the operations of the parent corporation, 1940s Buck Act. And everything within the democracy is designed to still limit your access and victimize you by engineered scarcity. Not just the mortgage process, because the mortgage issues a copy of the deed registered to the board of directors. And in order to own something, you have to have the original title with no separation from the instrument of payment. So the original title plus the payment instrument must be attached and never separated in order to prove ownership. So even when you think you pay off your mortgage, there's a tax, a Roman tax, that escheats your estate because you're paying in Federal Reserve notes. A note is a debt instrument. So you can never fucking get ahead because you're never allowed to own anything. As long as you're using debt instruments, you are behind the power curve. And ordinary people don't have the intelligence to understand this, nor do they show the intellect to be able to grasp or move beyond their serfism, their peonage. So everyone shows their incompetence as an heir, hence your estate is being managed by someone who is competent. You have a trustee that manages your estate because you're too fucking stupid to realize you own an estate. You think that the paper instruments that represent what's being stolen from you is actual money. You don't know that slaves, as a 14th Amendment citizen, are not allowed to own property and have no human rights. So you run around here praying and marching and keep hoping alive when you subjugate yourself by calling yourself the corporation that sounds like your name. So essentially the money game is a lie because it's not money, it's debt. The national debt represents the Service Corporation that was registered in 1754, France, by Benjamin Franklin to service the escheating of the estates to the heirs of the land. The land is called Morocco. The corporation is called the United States. So as a direct descendants to the people, the forefathers who created the peace and treaty, the peace and friendship treaty, and the Constitution, then you rightfully, as an Aboriginal person, own and have direct claim to the land, the resources. But you settle for a debt instrument in representation of the land and resources in the debt that's created by the Service Corporation that occupies the land, thanks to the Act of 1871, the Secret Treaty of Verona. So we have the doctrine of discovery, the Inquisition services, and we're in a position of unum sanctum policy executed on the inhabitants who are too stupid, distracted, arrogant about their ignorance. Therefore, the corporation in charge of the land is going to continue to steal, continue to subjugate. So because a corporation took over the republic in 1871, then there are no legal constitutional republic agencies in existence. Hence the civil orders by the Pope that was issued in 2014, where the head of the Service Corporation, because of pressure from the Red Dragon and Blue Dragon families, was told to control your subsidiary corporations. So you have mercenaries, code enforcers to the unum sanctum policy, or the Roman Cure system, that inflict death, peonage, human trafficking, subjugation on the inhabitants of the land. And that is the actual reality of what takes place, not the fantasy world that people live in. talking about discrimination, talking about black power, talking about all of these side conversations that has absolutely nothing to do with the corporation Walmart that controls the land. And then the subsidiaries of Walmart that sound like your name that you agree to call yourself. Because status is everything. Status determines what rights you're entitled to. So if you choose the lowest status within the nation, which is a subject, which is a 14th Amendment corpse, dead at sea or dead in law, because the corporation acts in admiralty law, maritime law. So you're dead at sea, you're a dead entity on paper, and the name of that corporation sounds like your name, which you agreed to call yourself. So any person that doesn't fall within the constitutional republic, guess what? They have no human rights. They're not party to the Constitution or the treaty that precedes the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. So if you don't read the Constitution or the treaty, and if you have no concept of what the Constitution, the treaty, or the rights of indigenous people says, then you have no human rights. Hence the police brutality, the killing, the human trafficking. What happened in Cuba when Batista was usurped and replaced by a CIA agent? What happened when that CIA agent took over Batista's territory? He nationalized Cuba and said Cuba for Cubans. So if you weren't Cuban, meaning identify yourself under the national flag within the land, honor the forefathers and foremothers who created the Constitution and treaty for the land of Cuba, then guess what? You had to fucking get the hell out. Because the only people who are protected under human rights are the people who honor the motherland in which they were born in. People are named after the land, land is named after the people, and rights come from the Constitution and treaty of the land. Therefore, anything you call yourself outside of that is unconstitutional, unlegal, or I should say unlawful. Therefore, you fall underneath the Christian black codes of the Roman Cure system. And if you take the time to read the Christian black codes, you are considered property of the church. And property is not allowed to own property. So when you call yourself or identify yourself underneath these pseudo names or these labels, brand systems, caste systems that are not associated with the land, then guess what? You're in dishonor. You're not in harmony with nature. Therefore, you're not entitled to rights. You think you come from somewhere else when you're indigenous to the land. You think Plymouth Rock landed on you. But the truth is, you stand and was born and are direct descendants of Plymouth Rock. So the issue is disassociation with your bloodline, your lineage, your history, and because of disassociation, you're in dishonor. And your dishonor brings unharmonious or not in harmony with nature, which means you suffer the repercussions from being away from your forefathers and foremothers. Honor thy mother and thy father, and the days of the earth shall be long, which means your bloodline, which means your direct descendancy, your inheritance. So you are inheritable to your heirship based on your dishonor, based on you calling yourself a subsidiary corporation on paper that sounds like your name. So Walmart has jurisdiction over your life, over your future labor, and your future children. And that's the reality of what's taking place within the Northgate, Turtle Island, Amexem, Morocco, So people refuse to wake the fuck up, and they're in a fantasy la-la land that has nothing to do with reality. So what do we do with people who are burdened to the land? The Georgia Guidestones, Rex 84, King Alfred, Executive Order 11490. That's what we do with people who are in dishonor. Unum sanctum policy within the operations of the Roman Cura system. This is what you need to realize when it comes to finance. The private commercial paper is a debt instrument. The debt instrument represents that of the service corporation that occupies the land and pretends to be government. Therefore, if you are not in harmony with nature or with what your forefathers created for rights with the indigenous people of the land, then guess what? You have another subset of rules in which you follow. The Christian Black Codes, the Noir Codes, within the Roman Cura system. So wake up or don't wake up. My thing is, if you don't wake up and you want to be in dishonor, shut the fuck up and stop complaining about the subjugated lifestyle that comes with being a subject, the lowest status within the nation. Deal with the death that they plan to ensure you fall into before you can possibly wake up to your heirship or your inheritance or your estate. Let them continue to do what they do without you running around here marching, praying, and causing a burden to civilized people who are aware of history, law, and nature. Because that's the situation. You have people who are awake that choose to be conversos, sellouts, and subjugate you. They're in those secret societies, and they walk around with acknowledgement to your forefathers, even though they celebrate your forefathers' demise. The conquer of the Red House, 1492, the last stronghold of the Moorish Empire, is what they celebrate, which is why they adorn their fez with jewels, tie down their degrees. And this is what you have to realize. The converso's job is to subjugate you and be minions to the thief, the parent corporation that pretends to be government and basically controls every aspect of your life. They are aware of this information because they are forced to learn it in order to obtain their degrees. Its difference is they sign a death oath for every degree that they obtain, and they're stupid because they settle for Federal Reserve notes that represent what the thief is stealing from the inhabitants of the land, as opposed to going after the same fucking thing the thief is going after, the land, the resources, the gold, and the silver. So they're even not respected by the thief, the parent corporation, because they're minions. And they're going to meet the same demise that the inhabitants of the land are going to meet. Because the goal of the thief is to steal and kill before you can wake up. It's sort of like somebody else occupying another country, taking the land and resources of that country, lying to the people and telling them that they're from somewhere else, and then controlling every aspect of their life to say that you are not natural to this country. You're just a slave and deal with it. And the people say, thank you, master. When the truth is, they are natural to the land. It's their land and resources being stolen. The corporation is nothing but a thief, and they're subjugating the people so that they can continue to steal. So this is what people don't have the cognizant ability to understand. And those people who try, basically, Stockholm Syndrome kicks in, where they love their master to the point where they're not willing to rise above their lowest house. They want to stay with Caesar, because Caesar takes care of me. I enjoy my job. I like my little debt notes. Not realizing that the world in finance is moving away from debt notes. The world itself is abandoning the harlot. So the harlot will be left basically with clay feet damaged and then fall in on itself, because the international community, not the stupid people within the Northgate who refuse to wake up, but the international community, the rest of the fucking world, is saying your treasury bills represent theft, and we're no longer going to accept them because you're trying to steal not only from the Northgate inhabitants who don't give a fuck and are asleep, you're trying to steal from the whole goddamn world. And the rest of the world is like, fuck that. You're not coming over here to do the same thing you did in Amexem, North Amexem. Do that shit over there. Subjugate those people that want to call themselves the corporation that sound like their name. But don't come to other countries and try the same shit. That's what the rest of the world has basically said. And they have aligned themselves with alternative forms outside of the US dollar. And they created alternative financial systems outside of the dollar hegemony. And they have told the parent corporation within the Northgate, that shit ain't gonna work over here because we know that we're sovereign. We know that we're nobles. And you're not gonna come to our country and steal our land, our resources, and treat us like we're fucking black. That's what the rest of the world has said. So you have to understand the operations within the Northgate and stop listening to these these sellouts, these conversos who basically subjugate you with belief systems that make you feel good when it doesn't affect change. It doesn't create any type of reality shifts or paradigm shifts. What it does is continue to perpetuate the lie, and you don't get any fucking results. So understand the money game. Understand that it's cheating from your estate to the Global World Trust is what's taking place. Understand that you are entitled to the land if you fucking come back into your natural persona. If you be yourself and honor the forefathers who created the Constitution and the treaty, and then you stand on the Constitution and treaty, that's when you have rights as a human being, aboriginal to the land. But until then, you can't fucking speak. You speak and you're declared incompetent, therefore fall right back under the Christian black codes. So realize that and make your fucking choice. Because the rest of the world has already made the choice. They said enough with the dollar hegemony. Enough with the Roman cure. Enough with the robbing, stealing, killing, human trafficking, peonage. It's only the Americans that choose to accept it. The rest of the world has woken up and has said enough is enough. So the military-industrial complex doesn't have enough ability to stretch itself thin enough to attack the whole goddamn world, even though that's their goddamn plan. When other nations have stood up and told the bully to sit the fuck down. That's why the Pope wrote the civil orders to President Obama and all the agencies or the subsidiary corporations within the Northgate. He wrote the civil orders to tell them, under pressure, sit the fuck down. Of course, they didn't listen. But realize what the fuck is going on. Get past your comfort zone and realize the real operations within the Northgate. Understand how you can save yourself from the thief killing you. Because that's what his plan is. Georgia Guidestones. Rex 84, King Alfred. And that's about as Barney style as I can put it. Because people refuse to wake the fuck up no matter what you say. And this level of stupidity is almost comical.